The auditorium was a gleaming marvel of polished chrome and glass, its massive windows framing the jagged skyline of the futuristic city outside. Hundreds of journalists, tech influencers, and space enthusiasts packed the rows of seats, their murmurs blending into a low hum of anticipation. On the center stage, under the piercing glare of holographic spotlights, stood Elon Musk, smiling, relaxed, and effortlessly magnetic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice amplified by invisible speakers that made him sound as though he were addressing the universe itself, "I'm thrilled to announce that we are one step closer to making life multiplanetary." A wave of applause rolled through the room, followed by the eager clicking of cameras and recording devices. Elon waited, hands clasped loosely in front of him, until the noise settled. "And today, I'm here to reveal the final price for a ticket to Mars." The room went utterly silent, like the collective breath of humanity had been sucked away. Even those watching live streams around the world leaned closer to their screens. "The cost," Elon said, pausing dramatically, "is 69,420 Dogecoin." Laughter rippled through the room, some amused, some incredulous, and some nervous, as people quickly calculated the equivalent in their local currencies. Elon grinned, clearly enjoying the reaction. "Why Dogecoin?" a reporter shouted, breaking the rhythm of scattered chuckles. "Because it's the people's currency," Elon said with a shrug, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "And because it's funny." More laughter, though now tinged with a sense of awe. Only Elon Musk could casually dictate the terms of interplanetary travel and make it sound like an internet meme. "Of course," he added, raising a finger for emphasis, "you'll need the exact amount. No change given. Exact Doge only." The room erupted again, a mix of cheers and groans, as reporters typed furiously into their devices. In a small, dimly lit cafe across town, Barron wiped his hands on his stained apron and stared at the flickering TV in the corner. The SpaceX logo hovered on the screen, sharp and clean, next to Elon's grinning face. "Exact Doge only," Barron muttered under his breath, shaking his head. The word sounded absurd, like something from one of his half-baked sci-fi stories. A customer waved impatiently from the counter, and Barron snapped back to reality. He poured a lukewarm cup of coffee, passed it over, and watched the news segment continue in silence. As Elon fielded questions with his usual charisma, Barron leaned against the counter, his mind drifting. The dream of going to space had once burned brightly in him, a fire that had dimmed over the years, buried under student loans, failed experiments, and the grind of minimum-wage jobs. But now, something about Elon's announcement stirred the embers again. Barron glanced at the tip jar on the counter, holding a few crumpled bills and coins. He chuckled bitterly. 69,000 Dogecoin, he whispered to himself. Might as well be 69 million. But as the press conference wrapped up and the screen cut to an image of a sleek rocket poised for launch, something inside him shifted. It was a small spark, faint but persistent, a reminder that dreams, no matter how improbable, were worth chasing. The customer called for a refill, and Barron moved to oblige, but his gaze lingered on the TV just a moment longer. The cafe was empty now, save for Barron and the dim hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. He stood in the corner booth where he dragged his laptop, scrolling through article after article about Mars colonization and Dogecoin. The dream had always been there. As a kid, he used to sleep with glow-in-the-dark star stickers on his ceiling, his prized possession a battered telescope he saved up for months to buy. His favorite class was astronomy, his favorite book, The Martian Chronicles. He wanted to be the first to step onto a new world. But life had other plans. He closed the tabs on SpaceX's announcement and opened his banking app instead. The numbers weren't promising. He was barely scraping by as it was. Barron sighed and stared at the Dogecoin exchange rates on another tab. Prices were soaring after Elon's announcement. He did the math in his head, how much he'd need, how much he could save, how much he could risk. It wasn't long before the cafe was his home away from home. Between shifts, he'd hunch over the laptop with furrowed brows, his fingers tapping furiously on the keys as he read forums, tutorials, and Reddit threads. He joined a Dogecoin group chat, where people shared memes and market speculation. "You're wasting your time," said Lena, his roommate, one night when he returned home with bleary eyes and a tray of leftovers from the cafe. "You'll never get there. It's a billionaire's playground, Barron. You can't play their game." Barron didn't respond. He sat down on their worn-out couch, opened his laptop, and stared at the star chart wallpaper on his screen. His telescope sat in the corner, gathering dust. He glanced at it, then back at the screen, the embers in his chest flaring just a little brighter. The world had gone Dogecoin crazy. Social media was flooded with memes, success stories, and viral videos of people claiming they were now one step closer to Mars. The price of Dogecoin climbed daily, and the air buzzed with speculation. For Barron, every spare dollar went straight into his crypto wallet. He picked up extra shifts at the cafe, delivered groceries on his bike at night, and started selling old junk online. His life became an endless grind of work, saving, and watching the market. One evening, as he sat in the back room of the cafe scrolling through crypto apps, his coworker Malik leaned over his shoulder. "Dogecoin? Seriously?" Malik laughed. "You're gonna bet it all on Elon's joke?" "It's not a joke," Barron muttered, not looking up. "It's a way out." Malik shrugged. "You do you, man. Just don't forget to split the tips." Barron didn't answer. He couldn't stop thinking about the price graphs, the way they surged and dipped like a heartbeat. He started setting alarms to check the market at odd hours, catching catnaps in the storeroom between shifts. His co-workers joked that he was married to his phone. One morning, bleary-eyed but triumphant, he checked his balance. The Dogecoin he'd bought weeks ago had doubled in value. He let out a whoop of joy, startling a regular customer. For the first time, he felt like he was making progress. But it wasn't enough. The buzz reached a fever pitch when SpaceX announced the Mars ticket lottery. A small number of tickets would be heavily subsidized, awarded to winners of a random drawing. The only catch? You still needed a deposit in Dogecoin to qualify. Barron felt a surge of hope as he watched the announcement on his phone during a break. "This is it," he thought. "This is my chance." That night, he pored over the application details. The deposit wasn't as much as a full ticket, but it was still more Dogecoin than he had. Barron's stomach twisted as he stared at his balance. He'd come so far, but it wasn't enough. At the cafe, a regular customer named Riley caught his attention. Riley was a sharp-dressed man in his late 40s, always glued to his phone, and often overheard talking about crypto. He had a casual air of confidence, the kind of man who seemed to have the world figured out. Barron decided to approach him. "Excuse me," Barron said one afternoon, mustering every ounce of courage he had. "You're into Dogecoin, right?" Riley glanced up, smirking. "I dabble." "Why?" Barron hesitated, then blurted, "I need help. I'm trying to save up for a ticket to Mars, and I'm close. But not close enough." Riley chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Mars, huh? You're not the first to dream big. What's your angle?" "I'll do anything," Barron said earnestly. "I just need advice." "Or a partnership." Riley raised an eyebrow. "Partnership? You do know how crypto works, right?" Barron flushed. "I know it's a long shot. But I'm serious. I'll work for it. I'll do whatever it takes." Riley studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. "All right, kid. I'll give you some pointers. But don't think I'm handing out freebies." Barron nodded, relief washing over him. As Riley began explaining strategies and pitfalls, Barron listened intently, the spark in his chest flaring into a flame. This was his shot, and he wasn't going to waste it. Barron's hands trembled as he placed 2 cups of coffee on the table where Riley sat, scrolling through his phone. "On the house," Barron said with a nervous smile. Riley smirked and set his phone down. "All right, kid. Let's talk. What's your plan?" Barron pulled up a chair and fumbled with his phone to show his Dogecoin wallet. "I've been buying whenever I can, but it's not enough." "You're good at this stuff. I was hoping you could mentor me." Riley chuckled. "Mentor you? What am I, a life coach? This is crypto, sink or swim." Barron's face fell. "Look, I know this sounds crazy. But I've been dreaming of going to space since I was a kid. I studied astrophysics before my life fell apart. This Mars lottery, this whole Dogecoin thing, it's the first time I've felt like it's possible again. I just need a chance." For a moment, Riley's smirk faded. He leaned back, studying Barron with a mix of skepticism and something softer. "You really want this, huh?" Barron nodded. "More than anything." Riley sighed. "All right, here's the deal. I'll show you how to spot trends, how to time the market. But you need to listen. No impulsive moves, no emotional trading. Got it?" "Yes," Barron said, relief washing over him. "Good," Riley said, picking up his coffee. "Let's see if you've got what it takes to ride the rocket, or crash and burn." Under Riley's guidance, Barron started making smarter trades. His Dogecoin balance grew steadily, and for the first time in months, he felt like he was making real progress. Then the crash came. Barron was sitting in the cafe storeroom, staring at his phone, when the alerts started flooding in. Dogecoin's value was plummeting. He watched in horror as his balance shrank, the numbers ticking down faster than he could process. "Sell!" Riley shouted over the phone when Barron called him in a panic. "Cut your losses." Barron hesitated, paralyzed by the thought of losing everything. "I can't," he whispered. "I'll have nothing left." "You'll have less if you wait," Riley barked. By the time Barron finally sold, it was too late. He stared at the new balance on his screen, the spark in his chest reduced to ashes. That night, he sat alone in his apartment, the glow of his laptop casting shadows on the walls. The telescope in the corner caught his eye, a silent reminder of the dreams he'd been chasing. He felt a lump in his throat, a mix of anger and despair. The next day, Riley found him slumped in the cafe, staring blankly at the counter. "You're not the first to lose big," Riley said, sliding into the seat next to him. "And you won't be the last." Barron didn't look up. "It's over. I can't recover from this." "Space travel isn't for quitters," Riley said firmly. "Do you think the first astronauts gave up when things went sideways? No. They adapted. They kept fighting." Barron glanced at him, skeptical. "What am I supposed to do now?" "Start over," Riley said. "You've still got a shot. The question is, do you have the guts to take it?" With Riley's encouragement, Barron threw himself back into the game. This time, he was more cautious, analyzing trends and making calculated moves. But he knew it wouldn't be enough to catch up in time for the Mars lottery. One evening, Riley called him with a tip. "There's a new altcoin launching tomorrow. High risk, high reward. You in?" Barron hesitated. "What's the catch?" "The catch is, you could lose everything. Or, you could double your Doge and make this whole Mars thing happen." Barron's heart raced. The logical part of his brain screamed at him to stay away, but the dream of Mars burned too brightly to ignore. "I'm in," he said. The next 24 hours were a blur of tension and adrenaline. Barron poured every coin he had into the altcoin, watching the market obsessively as the price fluctuated wildly. He barely slept, his eyes glued to the screen. By morning, the gamble paid off. The altcoin surged, and Barron quickly sold, transferring the profits back into Dogecoin. He stared at his wallet in disbelief. He had enough. Barron called Riley, his voice shaking with a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. "I did it," he said. "You did," Riley replied, sounding impressed. "Now go buy that ticket before you change your mind." Barron laughed, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you. For everything." "Don't thank me yet," Riley said. "You're the one who has to survive Mars." Barron hung up and stared at his phone, the SpaceX ticket portal open and waiting. His finger hovered over the "Confirm" button. This was it, the culmination of months of sacrifice, sleepless nights, and relentless determination. He pressed the button. A message flashed on the screen: "Congratulations. Your ticket to Mars has been secured." Barron leaned back, letting out a deep breath. For the first time in years, he felt like he was finally reaching for the stars. The SpaceX headquarters buzzed with energy, its towering glass walls reflecting the sunlight like a cathedral of innovation. Inside, hopefuls lined up to confirm their tickets to Mars. The air was electric, a mix of excitement, nerves, and quiet determination. Barron clutched his phone tightly, his Dogecoin wallet open, displaying the exact amount needed. He stepped forward when his number was called, his heart pounding in his chest. "Name?" the sleek attendant asked, barely looking up from her tablet. "Barron West." His voice cracked slightly, and he cleared his throat. "Verification complete. Transfer your Dogecoin now," she said, turning the tablet toward him. Barron's hands shook as he initiated the transfer. He double-checked the wallet address 3 times before hitting "Send." A loading bar filled on the screen, and with a soft chime, the attendant nodded. "Confirmed. Welcome aboard, Mr. West. You'll receive your launch schedule and pre-departure requirements via email." Barron stared at the screen, unable to process the words. It was real. He had a ticket to Mars. He stepped aside, letting the next person in line approach, and wandered toward a window overlooking the launch pad. A rocket stood tall in the distance, gleaming against the blue sky. It looked impossibly large, impossibly distant, just like his dream had once felt. His phone buzzed. It was Riley. "Well?" Riley's voice came through, gruff but with a hint of curiosity. "I did it," Barron said, barely able to keep the tremor out of his voice. "I'm going to Mars." Riley chuckled. "Attaboy. Now don't screw it up." Barron laughed, his chest lighter than it had been in years. He slipped the phone into his pocket and stood by the window a little longer, watching the rocket and letting the weight of his accomplishment sink in. The days leading up to the launch passed in a blur of medical exams, training sessions, and endless forms. Barron found himself among a diverse group of fellow passengers, scientists, engineers, dreamers, all bound for the same red horizon. The night before liftoff, Barron sat on the balcony of his apartment, staring at the city lights one last time. His telescope was packed away, but he held the eyepiece in his hand, a memento from his childhood. Lena came out, a cup of tea in her hands. "So, this is really happening," she said, sitting beside him. "It is," Barron said, a mix of excitement and sadness in his voice. "Thanks for putting up with me through all this." She smiled faintly. "You're crazy, you know that. But, I'm proud of you." Barron didn't know what to say, so he just nodded, his throat tight. The next morning, he stood in the boarding area with his carry-on bag in a sense of surreal disbelief. Riley had come to see him off, leaning casually against a railing. "You're not gonna cry, are you?" Riley teased. Barron grinned. "Not in front of you." They shook hands, a firm grip that said more than words ever could. "Good luck up there, kid," Riley said, his voice softer than usual. "Thanks," Barron replied. "For everything." With one last glance at Earth's blue sky, Barron boarded the spacecraft. The cabin was quiet, save for the faint hum of machinery and the murmured conversations of the other passengers. Barron sat by a window, his seatbelt snug across his chest. He stared at the control panel in front of him, his hands resting on his knees. "Final checks complete," a calm voice announced over the intercom. "Prepare for liftoff." Barron's breath quickened. He gripped the armrests as the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. He thought of the years he'd spent dreaming of this moment, the countless nights staring at the stars, the sacrifices, the risks, the doubts. 3, 2, 1. The rocket roared to life, a deep, thunderous vibration that shook the cabin. Barron was pushed back into his seat as the spacecraft ascended, the force of the launch stealing his breath. Through the window, he saw the sky shift from blue to black, stars emerging in their eternal brilliance. The curvature of Earth came into view, a fragile, glowing sphere suspended in the void. Tears welled in his eyes, not from fear or sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty of it all. The engines quieted as they reached orbit, and for the first time, Barron felt truly weightless. He unbuckled his seatbelt and floated slightly, turning to look out the window again. Earth was a distant memory now, a shrinking blue dot against the infinite canvas of space. For a moment, the cabin was silent. The passengers exchanged quiet glances, the enormity of their journey settling over them. Barron rested his hand against the window, his voice barely a whisper. "We're really doing it." As the spacecraft adjusted its course toward Mars, Barron closed his eyes and let himself float, the embers in his chest now a roaring fire. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing the stars. He was among them.